Some dreams are not born from ambition, but from desperation. From nights spent listening to the sound of your child's empty stomach, from the weight of exhaustion pressing on your chest. This is Maria's story, a mother who had nothing but the will to keep going. Behind the cramped kitchen of La Esquina, a rundown restaurant in Bogotá, Maria stood at a rusted sink, her hands submerged in scalding water. The scent of burnt oil clung to the walls, mixing with the acrid sting of bleach. Her fingers were red, raw from scrubbing plates stacked higher than her hopes. "Maria, faster!" the manager barked. She wiped sweat from her brow, ignoring the hunger gnawing at her ribs. The wages were barely enough, but she couldn't afford to lose this job. The streets of Los Cerros were dark when she made her way home, the flickering streetlights casting long, thin shadows. The air smelled of damp concrete and burning trash. The door creaked open. Inside, the single mattress in the corner was barely visible in the dim light. "Mama?" A small voice, weak. On the mattress, curled beneath a faded, threadbare blanket, lay Camila, her 6-year-old daughter. "Did you eat today?" Maria asked, her voice soft. Camila hesitated. Then a nod. Maria knew the truth. Her chest tightened. This wasn't life. This was survival, and she needed to find a way out. Maria lay awake long after Camila had drifted into sleep, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. The walls of their tiny apartment felt smaller each night, suffocating her with the weight of the life she couldn't escape. For months, she had pushed the thought away. The stories of those who tried and failed haunted her, the neighbors who had disappeared, the mothers who left and never made it, the children who never saw their families again. But there were also stories of hope. Andres had made it. He had left Bogotá with nothing, just like she would, and now he sent money home. He had a job, a roof over his head, a future she wanted for Camila. Maria pressed her palms against her face, exhaling slowly. She knew what she had to do. The next day, she slipped into the back of a small cafe in the southern district of the city. The man waiting for her wasn't a stranger. Ramon had smuggled more people across the border than she could count. "You sure about this?" he asked, lighting a cigarette. "Once you start, there's no going back." Maria hesitated. Then she nodded. "I need to do this." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He only cared about the money. $5,000, he said. "Half now, half when we get you across." Maria felt the weight of those words settle in her stomach. She didn't have that kind of money, but she would find it. That night, she gathered what little they had, a pair of earrings that had belonged to her mother, the battered radio Camila loved, the cheap television that barely worked. One by one, she sold them, each loss cutting deeper than the last. It still wasn't enough, so she borrowed, from neighbors, from old friends, even from people she knew she could never repay. In the end, it didn't matter, because the decision was made. Maria and Camila were going to America. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of sand and jagged rocks beneath a sky that offered no mercy. The sun hung heavy in the sky, scorching everything below, turning each breath into fire. Maria's legs ached with every step, her feet blistered inside worn-out shoes that were never meant for a journey like this. Camila clung to her side, her small hand limp in Maria's grip, her tiny legs struggling to keep up. "Just a little farther, mi amor," Maria whispered, though she had no idea how much farther was. The group around them, 13 souls in total, moved in silence, their faces carved with exhaustion and desperation. Each of them had paid the coyote to lead them across the border, but now, under the unforgiving heat, money felt meaningless. Only water mattered, and there was none left. Camila stumbled. Maria caught her before she could hit the ground, brushing away the grains of sand clinging to her sweaty skin. "Mama?" The little girl whimpered. "I'm thirsty." Maria's throat tightened. She reached into the small backpack slung over her shoulder, fingers searching for the last water bottle. When she pulled it out, it was nearly empty. She unscrewed the cap and pressed it to Camila's lips. "Drink slowly," she urged, though she knew her daughter wouldn't. The water was gone in seconds. A man ahead of them, a wiry figure with sunburned skin, collapsed. He hit the ground hard, sand billowing up around him. The others barely glanced back. No one stopped. Maria swallowed hard, tightening her grip on Camila's hand. "Mama, is he okay?" Maria hesitated, The man lay still, his body motionless beneath the relentless sun. "He's just resting," she whispered. It was a lie, but in the desert, the truth didn't matter. Only survival did. The border was close, close enough that Maria could almost taste hope on her tongue, feel the weight of exhaustion finally start to loosen its grip. The group moved quickly now, their steps lighter despite the miles they had walked. The coyote had promised they were nearly there, just beyond the next ridge, just past the dry riverbed. Beyond that lay America. Maria squeezed Camila's hand, her heart pounding. "We made it, mi amor," she whispered. "Almost there." Then came the sound she had feared most. A voice. Shouting. Then another. Bright beams of light cut through the darkness, slicing across the desert like knives. "Corey, run!" someone screamed. Maria's breath caught in her throat as the group scattered like birds startled into flight. She yanked Camila into her arms and ran. Sand slipped beneath her feet, her legs screaming in protest. The shouts behind them grew louder, commands in English she didn't understand, the sharp barking of dogs splitting the night. Camila clung to her, her tiny fingers digging into Maria's shoulder. "Hold on, baby," Maria gasped, pushing herself forward. "Hold on." Then came the sirens, the blinding red and blue flashing against the darkness, and the voices. "Stop! Hands up, don't move!" A shadow lunged toward her, and before Maria could react, she was yanked to the ground. Her knees hit the dirt hard. A cry tore from her lips as rough hands wrenched Camila from her grasp. "No, no, please! She's my daughter!" Maria pleaded, her voice raw with panic. Camila was screaming, her little arms reaching desperately for Maria. A cold voice above her barked orders into a radio. Maria felt the press of plastic zip ties cinching her wrists together. The realization hit like a blow to the chest. It was over. She had come so far, risked everything, and she had failed. The holding cell smelled of sweat, fear, and something stale and metallic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cold and unfeeling. Maria sat against the wall, cradling Camila in her lap. There were so many others, dozens of women huddled together, their faces hollowed by exhaustion, their eyes filled with the same silent question. What happens next? Maria had no answer. She only knew one thing. She was trapped. Maria didn't know how long she had been in the detention center. The days bled into nights, and the cold, fluorescent lights never dimmed. There was no sense of time, only the rhythm of fear. Whispers of mothers desperate to know what would happen to their children, hushed sobs in the darkness. Then one morning, the guards called her name. She clutched Camila's hand as they were led through the sterile hallways, her heart pounding. No one told her where they were going. No one explained what was happening. Then suddenly, they were outside, standing beneath an endless stretch of sky. The air smelled different, no longer thick with sweat and disinfectant. Maria turned to the officer, her voice hoarse. What happens now?" The woman barely glanced at her. "You're being released. You'll have a court date. Until then, you're on your own." Maria's knees nearly gave out. She wasn't sure if she wanted to laugh or cry. They were free. But they had nothing. No money. No home. No papers proving they had any right to be here. She tightened her grip on Camila's hand and took a breath. She had come too far to give up now. Maria wandered the streets, clutching a slip of paper someone had given her in the detention center, an address for a church shelter that helped immigrants. By the time she arrived, the sun had set, and the city had swallowed them whole. The shelter was tucked between two rundown buildings, its stained glass windows casting dim colors onto the cracked pavement. She hesitated at the entrance. Then the door opened. A woman in simple clothes, her face lined with kindness, looked at her and smiled. "You must be Maria." Maria felt something in her chest crack open. She exhaled and stepped inside. Maria's hands ached. The hot water scalded her raw fingers as she scrubbed dishes in the back of a dimly lit restaurant. The air was thick with the smell of grease and bleach, the metallic clang of plates and cutlery drowning out the distant hum of customers chatting in English, a language she still couldn't understand. She had been lucky to find work so quickly after arriving at the shelter. A woman from the church had whispered about a job in a kitchen. Under the table, cash only. It wasn't much, but it was something. The manager, a burly man with thinning hair, barely acknowledged her existence. "Faster!" he barked as he passed by, not even looking at her. Maria didn't respond. She couldn't. She had seen what happened to the other workers. Those who complained were gone the next day. No questions, no warnings. She knew better than to ask for a break, for more money, for anything. She worked until her back ached and her legs trembled. When she finally left, the city was asleep, the streets empty except for the neon glow of liquor stores and the occasional homeless figure curled beneath bus stops. She clutched the few crumpled bills in her pocket and made her way home to the shelter. Camila was waiting for her, curled up on a thin mattress, her backpack resting at her feet. "How was school?" Maria asked, brushing damp hair from her daughter's forehead. Camila hesitated. Maria knew that look. "Did the other kids say something?" The little girl nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her oversized sweater. "They laugh at me, Mama. They say I talk funny." Maria's heart ached, but she forced a smile. "They just don't know how smart you are yet," she whispered. "One day, you'll speak English better than all of them." Camila didn't look convinced. Maria pulled her close, pressing a kiss into her hair. They had made it here, but making it through, that was proving to be something else entirely. Maria lived in a constant state of fear. It lurked in the corners of her mind, in the shadows of alleyways, in the sudden wail of sirens cutting through the night. At work, she kept her head down, scrubbing plates, sweeping floors, making herself invisible. At the shelter, she avoided unnecessary questions. She had heard whispers of others, men and women like her, who had been taken. ICE raids had increased in the neighborhood. One night, a woman who worked at the same restaurant as Maria didn't come back. "They took her," someone murmured the next morning. "Right outside the store. They were waiting for her." Maria tightened her grip on Camila's backpack as they walked to school. She avoided looking at the police car parked on the corner. "Mama, why are you squeezing my hand?" Camila asked, glancing up at her. Maria forced a smile, loosening her grip. "No reason, mi amor." But there was a reason. Every time she stepped outside, she felt like she was being hunted. At the market, she moved quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone in uniform. On the bus, she sat near the back, as if distance could keep her safe. One day, while walking home, she heard it, shouting, running footsteps. A man sprinted past her, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with panic. Behind him, 2 officers followed, barking orders in English. Maria barely understood. She pressed herself against the nearest wall, gripping Camila's shoulders. The man was caught, dragged to the ground, handcuffed. Maria turned away before Camila could see the tears in her eyes. They were free. But freedom meant nothing when, at any moment, it could be ripped away. Maria had feared this moment for months, but when it finally came, it was worse than anything she had imagined. The knock on the door wasn't a knock at all. It was a bang, hard and final, shaking the fragile walls of the small apartment. Then came the voices. "ICE! Open up!" Her breath caught in her throat. Her body reacted before her mind could. She grabbed Camila and pulled her close. The door burst open. Men in dark uniforms flooded the tiny space. Their badges gleamed under the flickering light bulb. "Maria Alvarez?" one of them barked. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her body had gone rigid, her arms wrapped tightly around Camila. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know what she was begging for. One of them grabbed her by the arm. The moment he yanked her forward, Camila screamed, "Mama!" Maria struggled, twisting in their grip, trying to reach for her daughter. "Please, not in front of her," she sobbed. Camila was clawing at her, her tiny hands reaching desperately. Maria fought harder, but there were too many of them. They pinned her arms behind her back. The cold bite of steel cuffs snapped around her wrists. Camila was hysterical now, sobbing, screaming, her small body thrashing as another officer held her back. "Please, let me say goodbye," Maria begged. She didn't know if anyone even heard her. The next thing she knew, she was being dragged out of the apartment, her daughter's cries fading behind her. The night air hit her skin, but all she could feel was the emptiness where Camila had been. The sirens wailed, the world spun, then the doors of the ICE van slammed shut, and Maria knew it was over. Camila screamed until her throat burned. She kicked, thrashed, tried to tear away from the officer holding her back, but she was too small, too weak. "Mama!" Her mother was gone. The door had slammed shut, the voices had faded, and now there was nothing but silence. A stranger, an older woman with tired eyes, knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, you need to come with us," she said in a language Camila barely understood. Camila shook her head, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "No, no." "Mama." The woman sighed and reached for her hand. "We have to go." The police car swallowed her whole. She pressed her face against the cold glass, searching desperately for any sign of her mother. But the city outside blurred, and soon she didn't even know where she was anymore. When the car stopped, they took her inside a gray building. The walls were plain. The air smelled like paper and something metallic. There were other children there, some crying, some silent, some staring blankly at the floor. A woman handed her a blanket. "You can rest here, okay?" Camila shook her head. "No, I want Mama." The woman sighed. "We're trying to find her, sweetheart. She's safe. You'll see her soon." It was a lie. Camila could feel it. She curled up on the cot, hugging the thin blanket to her chest. The room was too cold. The lights were too bright. She squeezed her eyes shut. If she just fell asleep, maybe when she woke up, Mama would be there. Maybe this would all be a bad dream, but no matter how tightly she shut her eyes, the nightmare didn't end. Maria sat across from the lawyer, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles turned white. The detention center's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow over the dull gray walls. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. All she could think about was Camila, where she was, if she was safe, if she was crying herself to sleep just like Maria had done every night since they had been separated. The lawyer, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a softer voice, cleared her throat. "Maria, I won't lie to you," she said gently. "Your situation is difficult." Maria nodded. She had expected this. "You don't have asylum status, no visa, no sponsor. You were caught crossing illegally, and there's already an order for your removal." The words hit like a punch to the stomach, but Maria refused to let herself cry. Not yet. The lawyer sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "There's one option," she continued. "It's risky. We can apply for humanitarian parole, argue that being deported would put you or your daughter in danger, but the chances of approval are very low." Maria swallowed hard. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked. The lawyer hesitated. "Then they will deport you," she said finally. "And Camila, she will stay." Maria's breath hitched. The lawyer reached across the table, her voice softer now. "I know this isn't fair, but you have to prepare yourself for the possibility that you may have to leave without her." Maria's heart shattered. Leaving had never been the hardest part. It was leaving her behind. Maria had always known what fear felt like. She had feared hunger. She had feared the desert. She had feared the knock on the door that finally came. But nothing compared to the fear of what she was about to do. She sat in the cold detention center, Camila's name a whisper on her lips, the lawyer's words still ringing in her ears. If you fight and lose, she could be sent back with you. But if you leave, she stays. She gets a chance. Maria clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. A chance. Wasn't that why she had risked everything? Across the table, the lawyer watched her carefully. "There's a foster family willing to take her," she said gently. "It won't be forever. They'll care for her while we try to get you back." The words made sense. They were logical, practical, but nothing about this felt like logic. It felt like breaking. Maria pressed a hand to her chest, as if she could physically hold her heart together. She thought of Camila's dark curls, her sleepy smile, the way she always reached for Maria's hand, even in her dreams. How could she walk away from that? Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to speak. "Will they love her?" Her voice cracked. The lawyer nodded. "They'll take care of her." Maria closed her eyes. Then, with a breath that felt like drowning, she let her go. Maria had promised herself she wouldn't cry. She had whispered it like a prayer, repeating it in her mind over and over. Be strong for her. Be strong for her. But when they brought Camila into the sterile visitation room, all the resolve in the world shattered. "Mama?" Camila ran to her, small arms wrapping around Maria's waist, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of her mother's worn-out shirt as if letting go meant losing her forever. Maria knelt, holding her daughter close, pressing kisses to the top of her head, breathing her in, memorizing her. "I don't want you to go," Camila sobbed, burying her face in Maria's shoulder. Maria squeezed her eyes shut, swallowing the scream that wanted to claw its way out of her throat. "I don't want to go either, mi amor," she whispered, stroking Camila's hair. "But listen to me. You are going to stay here, and you will be safe. You will go to school, make friends, you will be brave." Camila shook her head, clinging to her tighter. "No, I want to be with you." Maria felt the guards shift behind her. Time was running out. She pulled back, cupping Camila's small face in her hands, forcing herself to smile through the tears. "One day I will come back for you," she promised. "No matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to do, I will find a way." A hand touched her shoulder. It was time. Maria stood, her heart pounding as Camila screamed, reaching for her, her little body twisting and fighting against the arms that held her back. "Mama, please, don't go." Maria kept walking. She didn't look back. Not until she was on the bus, hands pressed to the cold glass, watching through blurred vision as her daughter stood inside the detention center, small, alone, sobbing into the arms of a stranger. Maria laid her forehead against the window and wept. Maria stepped off the plane and into the thick, humid air of Bogotá. The city looked the same, the streets bustling, the scent of roasted coffee beans wafting from roadside vendors, the distant hum of motorcycles weaving through traffic. But to Maria, everything felt empty. She had left Colombia chasing a dream. Now she returned with nothing but the weight of loss pressing against her chest. The tiny apartment she once called home was still there, waiting like a cruel reminder of everything she had fought to escape. The same cracked walls, the same leaky roof, the same hunger gnawing at her ribs. But this time, it was different. This time, Camila wasn't with her. Every night, Maria lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echoes of her daughter's voice in her head. "Mama, don't go." The memory crushed her. But Maria was not done fighting. She found work cleaning houses, scrubbing floors for people who barely looked at her. Every peso she earned, she saved. Not for food, not for rent, for a way back. She visited every immigration lawyer in the city, begged for help, pleaded for options. There had to be a way. There had to be a way back to her daughter. And no matter how long it took, she would find it. Camila sat at the dinner table, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of her. The room was warm, the smell of baked bread and roasted chicken filling the air. But she didn't feel hungry. The couple sitting across from her, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, smiled gently, trying not to overwhelm her. "You don't have to eat if you're not ready," Mrs. Evans said softly. Camila nodded but said nothing. They were kind. Their house was big, clean, and filled with things she had never seen before. Soft carpets, glowing lamps, shelves lined with books and pictures of smiling faces. But it wasn't home. Home was a cramped apartment with a leaky ceiling. Home was the smell of her mother's hair. Home was the sound of Maria's voice humming lullabies in Spanish as she rocked Camila to sleep. At night, Camila lay in a bed that was too soft, staring at the ceiling, waiting for her mother to walk through the door. Waiting for this to all be a bad dream. But morning always came, and Mama never did. So she learned to survive. She went to school, even though the words in English felt like bricks in her mouth. She smiled when people spoke to her, even when she wanted to cry. She held on to hope, because one day, somehow, Mama would come back for her. Maria's story is not just her story. It is the story of millions. Mothers, fathers, children. People who risk everything, not for themselves, but for the hope of something better. Not because they want to break the rules, but because they have no other choice. Maria crossed the border, not out of greed, not out of recklessness, but out of love. The kind of love that makes a mother walk through the desert with blistered feet. The kind of love that makes her beg strangers for help. The kind of love that, in the end, forces her to make an impossible decision, to leave her child behind. The system that tore Maria and Camila apart is one that doesn't see them as people. It sees them as numbers, as cases to be processed, as burdens. But when you strip away the politics, the laws, the policies, what is left? A mother, a daughter, a family that just wanted to be together. Should that be a crime? Maria's fight isn't over. She is still waiting, still searching for a way back. And Camila? She is still waiting too. Waiting for a day when she won't have to wonder if she will ever see her mother again. But how many other children are waiting? How many other Marias are out there sitting alone in a foreign country, aching for the child they left behind? And the hardest question of all, does it have to be this way? What do you think? Do people like Maria deserve this? Or is there another way? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of loyalty, love, and the incredible bonds between humans and animals. Join us as we share stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment.